Hey there, I'm Steve, and welcome to Jamsinentertainment. And welcome to the conversation. Just before we get started, there are many ways you can help this channel. One is like and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. But most importantly, please share this video or audio, depending on how you're consuming this. Let the people know that there's a world out there, a community out there, that they can join and have conversations like this. Today, I'm joined by my friend Jen. We're going to be talking about film, and um, I'm sorry, Jen, I forgot that quickly. Could you please restate your degree?
Oh, I have a master's degree in moving image archiving and preservation.
Oh, nice.
So I know how to take care of film and audio.
All right, thank you. And how are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So how did you get your start in the? Would you consider yourself a movie buff or just a lover of film? Or I guess that's the same thing. I don't know.
I guess I would. I guess you could call me either, right? Certainly, more so when I was younger. I was really into movies and film and just sort of watched anything I could get my hands on. Currently, it's a little bit harder to make space and time to watch movies. Different stage of life.
Right.
But certainly, film is still something I really enjoy and have a deep appreciation for. I think it's a very interesting medium for whether it's for like creative output, in all its various levels.
And what led you to get your master's degree in the archiving and preservation of film and audio?
So I came out of college with a bachelor's degree in history and no teaching cert. Right. So
was that general history or like American or British or?
It was just a generic bachelor's of history degree. We did have to take a focus, and I do not remember what mine was. Because it's been, let's see, graduated college in 2005. So
15 years, wow.
We're going on,
16 years. 16 years.
Exactly. But I had minors in music history and art history.
Oh, nice.
Along with my degree. And I love film, so I had written a couple papers for different courses that incorporated film. A big one was for, we had a very large paper, moderately large paper for our one course that you needed to do to graduate, like a senior sort of project course. And what I did was I looked at film in the years leading up to the establishment of the State of Israel, specifically looking at images of like how film in America presented the Middle East and sort of North Africa, and how it presented Arab people, and then sort of drew a through line showing how that representation in film had an influence and an impact on Americans' conception of that part of the world, which then impacted, what they would say to their senators, and then what our government then chose to do or not do in terms of influence coming out of World War II and sort of when they were making the decisions they did. So that was like that was a big moment for me, really looking at sort of accessibility and availability of older media. And you know, we're trying to remember what year I did as my starting point. But like we're talking like 20s, 30s, 40s.
Oh, wow.
For film. So, you know, obviously I was not accessing primary source material or anything like that. A lot of my material was coming through other sources. So I'm reading reviews that people had of these films. I'm sometimes seeing some footage because like the Library of Congress was just starting to put some stuff out there that you could access online. Not a lot because like the internet was still kind of new in 2005. Like, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't what it is today.
Right. It wasn't quite YouTube.
So yeah, it was a lot of, you know, reading other people's sort of, not analysis, because they did like do very discrete like layouts of like, this is the scene, this is the dialogue, here's still images. But I didn't have a lot of access to actually watch a lot of it, right? Like I couldn't, like today, you can source so much more media because so much has been digitized.
Right.
But back then it was harder. But yeah, so you know, graduated with a bachelor's degree. There's not a ton you can do with a bachelor's degree in history, straight out the gate. So
what about being a historian?
I was exploring the few. What was that?
What about being a historian?
Well, so for that you need continuing education. So like you have to go on to get a master's and usually a PhD, because you're basically saying at that point you're going to work to some level in academia or in museums, and most museums want at minimum a master's, usually a PhD, if you're going to be working with collections and things like that.
I did not know
always.
That.
You know, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's more of a general, what you observe.
Right.
But yeah, I started looking into different careers and realized at that point I would probably need some continuing education, right? And I wanted to work with objects. I didn't want to be purely
research.
I didn't want to be a pure academic, basically. Okay. I wanted to work with physical objects, and I wanted to do something that would interact with the public, maybe not in a face-to-face way, but more in like the things I'm doing have an impact on the people that want to interact with this media or have access to it. And I got lucky. I found 2 programs that were exactly that. So audio and visual archiving and preservation. And then I also found a couple of just film, like master's degree in film studies, that looked like there would be enough flexibility in space that I could get that hands-on knowledge and experience if I chose to go in those programs, / if they would take me.
Nice.
But I got lucky. I got into one of the programs that was actually designed for, you know, audiovisual archiving and preservation. And so, yeah, I went to grad school and learned an incredible amount of information. Fair portion of which I've probably forgotten at this point. I would need to like re-up my knowledge base.
Which school?
It's the program I attended is in NYU. It's part of Tisch School of the Arts. The other program is in UCLA, I believe. It's called the MIAS program, Moving Image Archiving Studies. It's the differentiator.
So you studied in New York and LA?
No, just New York.
Okay.
LA has a similar program.
Oh, okay.
So there was, Yeah. Slightly different focuses. LA is a little more industry focused for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
New York, the program I attended, at least at the time I was attending it, again, this is 15 years ago, I was a little more focused on the nonprofit or cultural institution type spaces. We did get exposure to, we got exposure to how preservation and archiving is needed within the industry, so like in the creative industries. But we also spent a lot of time learning about some of the very unique challenges you have when you're trying to preserve and provide access to audiovisual materials in cultural institutions. So whether that's, a private collection or a special collection in a library, or that's a museum, or maybe that's a dedicated film archive, it ran the gamut. So yeah, and then got a good, really strong grounding in metadata and taxonomy, because at that time it had sort of become apparent within sort of the archival world that digitization was going to be a really important part of preservation and access, for a couple different reasons. But, the idea that the best way to provide access to film was by making physical copies of the film onto new film stock was going away. And so I got lucky. Our program really gave us both sides of that. So we learned the basics of actual physical preservation, both in, the care, cleaning, and maintenance of the original item, plus we got to meet and learn how you do like actual transfers and copies. And then we also learned the digital side and got to meet people who were more focused on that form of preservation and access.
Nice.
Well,
now the digitization has been made fairly easy. I haven't bought the device. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a device. I have it saved in my YouTube watch later. It's just going over how it works. But you literally can take like Super 8, feed it through like you're actually going to project it. But what it does is it records to a digital like SD card or something.
Yeah, and the fact that those devices are starting to become accessible to the general public is pretty awesome.
I think it was only like $500 or something like that.
So, I, again, love the accessibility of it. Question, I don't know that kind of a device would get you the quality level you need to do, like, full-on, like, preservation. Like, long-term, you want to make this last as long as it can.
Right.
But certainly, in terms of making that accessible to the general public so that they can manage their home movies and things like that, that's awesome. And even maybe within institutions, if they needed a way to get quick access versions of things when they didn't have the budget to do like a full, like, hardcore preservation project on a piece, I could see that being really useful. Well, I would have to see it. It would depend on how it's actually handling the film, and you have to do your risk analysis of.
I could send you the link.
Would this device actually harm the film in the process? In which case, you don't want to do that.
Right. I could send you the link, but how it caught my eye. I have this idea for like a short film that's like thriller horror. I don't know. It's just this obscure idea in my head, and I wanted. Well, okay. At first, all got the idea from the fact that my one job, I was working in receiving. Someone dropped off some actual Super 8 cameras that were still functional.
That's
And
awesome.
we don't technically dispose of those because we don't sell them. So I took it.
Okay.
And there are companies that still make Super 8 film. And then I had this
few and
idea.
far between, but yes.
Yes, and it's kind of expensive unless you use black and white. So then I had the idea for the short film, and I was like, I have this thing that's really cool, and I want to utilize it somehow. And the idea is, well, to use it in the film with the digital, because I didn't want to shoot something and then just try to figure out how to make the effect that it looked like it was old film. I would be using old film. So that's how I know about this one device.
Well, so I so don't want to be a Debbie Downer right now, and I apologize in advance.
Part of this is me learning, so go right ahead.
Okay, so when people think of the old film visuals, so like little scratches, the little pops, maybe the film isn't quite in the frame, like to us visually it doesn't look in frame, and that just means that it's not actually running properly through the projector. All of that stuff, or like if you're thinking about like old color film and everything's maybe faded to red, and like those sorts of things we think of when we think old film, that's all part of the aging process of the film after it's been printed. So if you bought 8mm film stock, right? And originally, right, you buy negative, so you buy your 8mm negative reel. You load up your camera, you shoot your footage, and then you either like down and dirty develop it yourself using a garden hose or send it out to a lab to develop it for you. Yeah, I have this. Yeah, so minor tangent. I have this amazing physical zine that takes you through how you can shoot and develop your own film at home, like sort of punk style, without having to use a lab. Obviously, you need to like get your hands on all the appropriate chemicals and
right. I did not even realize that would be the case. I figured this is how little I know. I figured shooting Super 8 would be similar to shooting, to recording on a cassette tape, but it's visual instead of audio. See, no. I did not know I was missing a lot of steps in between.
Yeah, so film is just like, you're younger than me, but not by much, so you might remember this.
It's
do
like
you
3
remember
years
when we had like the point and shoot cameras that like were cardboard, or like you would get like before digital cameras, when you would get like a roll of film.
Yeah. And then the disposable versions of those, yeah.
So that's the same process, whether it's a still image or a moving image. It's the same mechanical chemical process of capturing the image and then having to develop it, right?
That's really cool.
So you start with what?
That's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the very, very earliest moving images were not film the way we think of film. They were called like kinetoscopes, and it was a series of still images on a drum, and then around the drum was a secondary drum with slits in it, and there would be a light. And you would spin the interior drum,
right?
And you would view through a single slit. Which kind of like focus, right?
Correct me if I'm wrong.
And what it did was, as the images spun, the still images, your eye, once they got going at the right speed, your eye would interpret them as a smooth motion, as opposed to a series of still images it was seeing in sequence. And that's what's happening when you look at a projected piece of film today, right? Or even a digital piece of media too. None of it is actually
moving.
Your eye isn't capturing it as as motion the way you view like your actual life.
Right.
It's still actually seeing a series of still images at, 24 frames per second, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Don't take that as gospel, because, like I said, I've forgotten more than I learned, probably. But yeah, so,
I think that is typical frame rate for older films, and now it's like in the 30, and then like you have weird ones like The Hobbit that does 60. Or if you're on Twitch like me, you do like a 60 frames per second for a video game.
Right. So that all has to do with yeah. But yeah, so film, when you talk like the physical object of film,
right,
as opposed to like the creative media or art of film, physical film, you get your negative that has to be developed and then printed onto film stock and so forth. So to get back to the original thing, which is your idea of wanting to like incorporate old film, quote unquote, into your digital project, a new print will not have those visual artifacts that you think of when you think of old film, because the way film gets those little scratches and the pops and the things is through its age and through being projected multiple times. And in the case of the color film that looks red, that happens because as the emulsion that sits on the film ages for colored film, the dyes degrade at different rates, and reds last the longest. So when you see like a film from the 70s or something being projected and it looks sort of tinted red, it didn't look like that when it was first shown. It's just that over the last 30 years, all of the blues and greens have degraded and faded out of the emulsion, and you're left with reds.
So a Super 8, or I guess any physical film shot today, will look just as clear as digital, if not better?
Super 8's really small, so it's probably not going to look as good as digital.
That's why I included other forms. Like Tarantino is obsessed with shooting. Tarantino and Nolan are obsessed with shooting on film, using especially, I think, Panavision. I don't know. I might be talking out of my ass.
Okay, so so something like the Hateful Eight, which was shot on wide format.
Right. It was shot in Panavision, 70 millimeter.
I don't remember.
70 millimeter.
But Tarantino shot it on film, right? Actual film stock.
Right.
And so the quality of that image is comparable, equal to, whatever you want to say, to a digital image. It 100% is. And the majority of people who saw The Hateful Eight in theaters did not see film, right? They saw a digital projection. Tarantino shot it on film, and then it was digitized for the majority of releases. But they did a road show where they showed it to people on actual film stock, which is awesome. The big difference you'll see with film stock versus digital in terms of quality of image is in the blacks. Because when you see black on a projected film image, projected it like through physical film, right? Not a digital projection, like a old school projection.
Right.
The blacks you're seeing on screen are truly the absence of light, because what's on the emulsion is the basically it there's no image there, right? Like it is think like if you're looking through a clear pane of glass, and someone puts a physical object in front of it, and now it looks black because like you're backlit.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm explaining this.
No, I get it.
That's what's happening, because you're shining light through the film stock, and as the light's shining through, it's shining through, all your different colors and all that, and where you see black on the screen, light is not passing through, right? So it's truly the absence of light. When you're looking at a digital projection, of an image. That's not possible by nature of what a digital projection is, right? So the blacks in digital projection are never truly black the way it is on projected film. So that's like your big differentiator.
So
and
we're really missing something from digital film because of it.
I mean, the quality is really high for digital film now, and you know, the majority of the things you see in theaters are shot digitally today. So like, you're not losing anything because the whole process from conception through you know,
post
sharing is it within a digital sphere. There are certainly purists who say you are missing out, right? There are. 100% there are. I mean, if you see them projected side by side, yeah, you see a difference. You will see a difference. I don't know in the day-to-day of like people experiencing film if it's that different. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there is something to be said for consistency of the image. So like in a digital projection, as long as you maintain your projector and you know, make sure your light bulb isn't about to die or anything, the quality of that image that you project the first time versus the 100th time is going to be exactly the same. With film, that's not the case. No matter how well maintained a projector is, the physical process of running the film through the projector is going to cause wear, right? And if you have a really good projectionist who maintains the equipment and like is amazing at their job, and those people are badass, I'll tell you right now. Like really good projectionists are awesome people. You know, that wear will be minimized, but you can never completely negate it, right? Because it's a physical object running through a machine. Like it's gonna get worn down. It's gonna pick up dust. It's, you know, try as you might, you're probably gonna get a scratch here and there. Like it's just gonna happen. Yeah. So,
there's
you know, no matter what, unless everyone sees it the first time it's projected, someone's gonna get a quote unquote degraded experience down the road. But, so like pros and cons to everything, you know?
Yeah, that makes me wonder, like movie buffs before our time that would go and watch the movie, if they picked up on things like that. I'm sure they must have.
Some. I think it depends on the viewer and how sensitive they are to things. We met this wonderful group of people that that work at a lab that, you know, did a combination of preservation activities on film, and then they also would process new film as well. They did both. And was it a woman or a man? I believe it was a woman. I don't remember exactly, and I don't remember their name, which would be helpful. But their job, one of their jobs was to color balance the film. So they'd watch it and they'd be like, you know, working in at the machine. And you watch them in complete darkness and anything. But their eye had become so trained to like look for these hyper specific things when you to appropriately balance the film, that they could no longer see a movie in a movie theater if it was going to be projected on film. They couldn't go see it if they weren't going to see it within the first week of its run. Because by the second week in its run, it's going to start picking up dust. There's going to be a scratch. And they would see it. Like, they noticed it. Because that was their job, right?
It sounds like a superpower, but it also sounds like it's like a negative at the same time. Because they have to see it the first week, and if they didn't get the chance to see it the first week, what do?
Well, you wait until it comes out on video.
Well, yeah, but there are some movies that are meant for the big screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Dunkirk. Did you see Dunkirk?
I haven't seen it yet.
All right, that
like
movie.
Like I said, I would say the last 5 or 6 years, my movie watching has like tanked, and I've seen very little.
Well, that movie, in my opinion, is like, yeah, you can own it and watch it at home, but it's great if you've seen it on the big screen first.
I believe it.
So, this makes me wonder, when you first saw the film in my place just sitting there, did you die a little?
Which one?
My rolls of film that are on the DVD rack.
Oh.
Yeah, did you die a little?
Yeah, that's why I went and looked at them. I was like, what does he have sitting on that shelf? And it was, it was old trailers.
Yeah.
Old, I'm saying old. They're like from the late 90s. But that's also, I don't know if you noticed, but like, that's why when I was looking at them, I was like, being very careful to not touch the emulsion in the face.
Right.
I also was looking at like how it was wound and, just getting a sense of what it was. But yeah, that's not a great way to start.
Did you die a little when you saw that?
Yeah, but it's also very common, right? Like people who aren't into it or where it's not part of their job. Though to be fair, I don't know a single person who works in film archiving that doesn't love film. Yeah, I can't think of one. So yeah.
Well, okay, so that all started with my brother. I think for whatever reason he just somehow got them from Marple, the Marple 10. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know where the film came from. I want to say Marple 10 because we both worked there. It was both of our first job. He could have got them from a flea market for all I know, and he just let them sitting out. I just figured I could leave them sitting out. And, like, they're next to movies. I just figured it's aesthetically correct.
Which is fine, because, like, you're not trying to preserve these, like, random trailers and ads.
Yeah, I only remember one of them, like, the first few that you look through in the light, like, there's a plane in it. I have no idea what's it for, but, yeah, there's a plane in it.
Yeah, you probably have to unwind more of it to, like, get a sense of what actually is going on.
And how long do you think those actually are? Is it like 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
Oh, not even.
Really?
Those are like 30-second spots or less.
Oh, wow. It's amazing how much film makes up a movie then. Wow.
So, in an, like, if you, like, I want to say, like, if you go to, like, a 90s, say, like, an AMC or whatever, when they were projecting film, a standard, like, hour-and-a-half movie would be, oh, God, I hope I get this number right. We might need to fact-check this later. Or someone will comment and be like, oh, she was wrong. If my memory is correct.
I can always edit it out if you want to Google it.
Is somewhere in, like, the 6 to 9 reels space.
Wow.
Because you think on a 35 millimeter piece of film, each image is, I don't know, like an inch and a half, like high, I guess you would say, like running the length, not the width, right? Because the width is 35 millimeters. And it takes, if you're projecting at 60 frames per second, or 24 frames per second, like whatever your projection rate is, it'd be that number of images in a second. And so then you extrapolate that out. So like film takes up a lot of space. And so one of the things you'll see like in mass released film that's been like out and rotated through, especially when it was shown at like big mega plexes like an AMC and things like that, you're going to see a lot of edge damage, so damage to where the perforated things are on the edges of the film, because what they would do is called, well, you probably saw this platter projection. The film would actually be laying flat like a pancake.
Right.
Instead of up and down like what you saw in school with like the 16 millimeter.
Mm-hmm. That's the one job I didn't do at AMC, projectionist. But I have had to go up there to the office sometimes, and I saw it. Yeah.
Well, so one of the things they would do with platter projection is you would take all of those reels that you were sent by the film studio, and someone, usually whoever, one of the projectionists, would sit and then splice them all together onto one giant reel, which is why it had to be plattered, right? It had to be on its side because it physically couldn't stand it up.
That would be a mess.
Well, so then it's constantly sitting on its edge, and that causes damage.
Right.
Plus, you have to like then twist the film up into position to project it, and it's a whole thing. Before people started platter projecting film, you would always have 2 projectors for every screen. And what you would do is you'd start projecting the one reel, you'd get the second reel set up on the other projector. And before the movie started, the projectionist would have made sure that both of the projectors were casting the same, it's called heat, but basically that the intensity of the light was the same, that they were both focused the same, and that they were both aligned correctly to the same spot. And what would happen is you'd start playing the first reel on the first projector, you'd have the second reel set up on the second projector, and you would see these little dots up in the corner called cigarette burns, because they look like a cigarette burn. They're not actually made by running the film, but you'd see it, and that would be the cue, and you would know how much, because the projectionist would set it up, on that next reel, you would know how much lead there was before the image, and when you saw the right signal on the thing that was actively playing, you would start the second reel, and you would cut over. So the first reel would run out, the second reel, the image should pick up right there, and if the projectionist has done their job correctly, the audience never sees it, notices. And then they get the third reel set up on the first projector, and just back and forth until the movie's over.
Oh, wow.
That was like original projection, right?
Sounds
and then
exhausting.
Someone figured out platter projection, and it all changed. And then someone else figured out digital projection, and now finding a theater that projects film is a very rare thing, and is wonderful. But yeah, so there's like been a progression.
So what got your start in watching movies? Did you just watch movies as a kid, or was there something that was there one movie in particular that grasped you and just projected you forward?
I don't know if there was one that projected me forward. There was definitely a place. So I always like to watch movies, whatever. But well, you would know this because we grew up in the same area. You know where Nativity is?
Yeah.
You know where the Wawa is now, that shopping center? Do you remember when that used to have a Blockbuster in it?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That shopping center next to the Wawa.
Right. It wasn't a Blockbuster, but it was a movie rental.
But it used to be an independent video store.
Yeah, I think it was movies, or something like that.
Yeah. Before the Blockbuster moved in down by the Acme and took all the business, there was an independent video store there. And when I was, I'm going to say 11 or 12, something like that, my parents would let me walk from my house to the video store. They trusted me to do that.
Nice.
And they also sometimes would let me go after church, stop in. And the general rule was I could rent whatever I wanted. They didn't care. If I was late, if I forgot to return it, I had to pay the fees. Right? That was our agreement.
Reasonable.
The people in the video store did not care that I was nowhere near 18 and let me rent anything I wanted. So, and at first it was all the stuff you'd expect. It was just random stuff. But then when I was about, 14, 15, I started watching a lot of foreign films. They had a pretty robust foreign film section. So I watched a lot of French film. I watched a lot of British film. And then I started talking to the guy behind the counter, and he was like, hey, do you want, and he would make recommendations based on whatever I just watched. And so I watched, I don't even remember everything I watched, but I just watched a lot of different different things, different ways that people were telling stories, and different stories they were telling. There's one that stands out in my mind, partially because I was a little bit older when I finally saw it. I think I was like 15. Because that was, it would have been around 15, because they shut down soon after that, and that's around when they went out of business. Tromeo and Juliet.
Tromeo
and Juliet. So I had seen B movies on television and did not know that's what they were, right? I didn't have a vocabulary for it. I just knew they were movies on TV that, like, weren't the ones they show late at night. This was, like, right. Saturday mornings, Saturday afternoons, like, the local people, whatever, would show these random B movies. Tromeo and Juliet was my first exposure to, like, the sort of Tromeo universe, that idea of the intentional B movie that grew out of the B movies of the 50s and 60s, which was really cool. It was like a new thing for me to, like, realize, so, like, there's other people making movies besides big movie studios that show their stuff over by the mall and people in other countries. Like there's other Americans making movies that not everyone goes and sees. So that was pretty cool, and I think that stuck with me for a while.
Is Tromeo and Juliet one of those it's so bad it's good movies, or is it just a B movie?
Trying to remember. Well, no, because, like, I'm trying to separate, like, my personal experience of it,
right,
from, like, sort of like a more objective sort of, I would put it in the category of so bad it's good, for sure.
Well, I only ask that because it's Tromeo and Juliet. I don't even know who Tromeo is. It sounds absurd.
It's a company, a film production company. Hold on. Can you still hear me? Because I'm going to try to Google something while I talk to you.
Yeah, I can. I'll edit out any research that you do because it'll be like dead air. So.
Yeah, no, we will narrate through this. Hold on.
Okay.
Because I don't want to get it wrong. They do a lot of sort of current day.
So wait. You're saying it's not the title of the movie, it's the name of the production company? Or is it both?
So the production company is called Troma Entertainment, Troma. Tromeo and Juliet is the name of the film they made.
Okay.
One of them.
Speaking
Troma Entertainment makes B movies. Just like...
Well, I mean, that's amazing. Because, I mean...
Yeah.
It's difficult to make a movie, period. And the fact that you make movies, it sounds like they make movies for themselves. They do have a fan base, but it's not like, Hollywood level. The fact that
it's definitely independent, right?
Right.
Independent filmmaking.
The fact that you're making movies for the love of the craft is amazing.
Yes. And I guess that was something else that happened. So the Bravo TV channel started when I was in high school. But it was, like, before they started doing reality TV shows and things like that. So, like, at that time, Bravo showed a bunch of foreign films, broadcasted the Independent Spirit Awards, and had Inside the Actors Studio. And that was it. That's what they did.
I love Inside the Actors Studio. It's a shame that he passed.
Yeah. I loved that show.
I think his name was James Lipton.
Yep, James Lipton. Who's actually a very interesting person if you, like, read his biography. Or, like, I don't know if he actually wrote an official biography, but, like, if you go online and, like, read about his life. But, yeah, I liked, Inside the Actors Studio was a great opportunity to, like, hear people talk about the thing they do that they really love and get to just sort of understand the work that goes into it, and then also the different approaches to it, right? Like,
yeah,
not everyone does the work in the same way. I always wish they had done an equivalent type of show with someone as knowledgeable as James Lipton, but knowledgeable about like the actual practical aspects of filmmaking and the artistic aspects, but not of the acting, but more
Right.
of the like.
So with directors and maybe producers instead of the actors.
Well, and I would say not even just directors and producers. I would say like get your like directors of photography. So like your people that work the cameras, your lighting people, your costumers, your makeup artists, because you know, regardless of the style of the director, whether they're very like I have my vision and we must execute it, or they're more collaborative. Films do not get made by one person.
Right.
Right? So, like, if a director is, like, the very singular vision, like, I know exactly in my head what I want to see on the screen, they still need to be able to communicate that to people, and people need to be able to provide it to them in a way that actually works.
Right.
Right? And so, like, and that's a skill, and that's an art, and that's... Yeah, I would love to hear something similar to like where actors got this opportunity to talk about how they approach the work they do. I'd love to hear that from the other people that make film possible.
Well, you do get some kind of a glimpse of that if you watch behind the scenes. I mean, granted, they maybe get like 5 minutes to talk, but you do get some kind of a glimpse.
Yeah, not the same.
Right. I get what you're saying, but a longer format would be better. I get what you mean.
Yeah, it would give them the opportunity to really talk about it.
Right.
Like, really get into it and, like, you know,
well,
what draws them to...
Behind the scenes features on movies is partially what got me into film. Because, I mean, okay, so my film journey is probably more the average viewer, and I'm becoming a movie buff. And I started watching big movies, and I was like, how do they do that? The main question was, how do they like literally get away with murder? Because they're not actually murdering anyone. And so I started watching behind the scenes, especially Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. It's just absolutely amazing the work that goes into making a film, especially Lord of the Rings. If you ever want to learn like the or see behind the veil of movie making, it's not in depth because it's not a long format with one person. It's you get people to say their piece. Like, this is what I do and this is how we do it. If you want to pull the veil back, behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings is a great start.
Yeah, I love that Lord of the Rings really... I think...
Lord of the Rings...
Maybe an unfair statement to other movie makers, but I felt leading into the Lord of the Rings, filmmakers were getting further and further away from using practical effects.
Right. Jackson's one of the directors of that time period to want to incorporate like every trick in the book you possibly can. So you can look at like one scene and there's like 5 layers of effects there. It's amazing.
But what's awesome is he didn't just rely on what you can do in post-production. He didn't just rely on the computer's ability to shift things. He did like I said, like the practical effects, right? Like,
well, that's what I mean by there's like 5 layers of effects there. You have he's using miniatures. He's using what are they, murals when they're using paintings? Okay.
Backdrops.
Yeah, he's using that. He's using camera tricks, especially for the hobbits, to make them look smaller. He's using camera tricks like that. I mean, they actually, you take the camera from one angle that shows you the trick or shows you the illusion, and then you shift it over a foot, and you see the mechanics behind it. It's that,
and I loved that about it because I think on some level it reminded people in the industry, like, oh, we don't just have one tool. We have a whole toolbox of tools, and we can use them all
Yeah,
to make awesome things.
that's why I'm grateful for directors like Nolan and Tarantino, especially Nolan. I think he hates CGI more than Tarantino just a bit. It's crazy. I watched the behind the scenes of Tenet. Oh my god. He just seems to like go bigger and bigger and bigger with each one of his films. If he could have physically gone out to space for Interstellar, he would have.
Probably. Maybe he'll be the first one to do it, right?
Possibly.
As they get us closer and closer to.
He needs to become he needs to become buddies with Elon Musk.
Just outside the atmosphere.
Yeah. I could see him. I could see him not remaking 2001: A Space Odyssey, but wanting to do his own version of it. You could possibly say Interstellar was that. I haven't seen Interstellar, but Nolan is the kind of director that would possibly want to do something close or at least homage to 2001, but actually in space.
I don't know. He seems to like to tell his own stories. You know?
Yeah, but each director, at least from my experience and watching movies, especially older ones, storytellers in general, they take from where they know and they put their own twist on it. Grant you, Nolan does his best to be very original, and he does a good job at that. But I'm sure people smarter than me can see where he got his inspiration from.
Well, probably. I mean, I guess it gets to that whole idea that like there's nothing truly new because humanity has existed for as long as it has, and so like everything is a reformatting or reframing of what's come before.
Well, I know Akira Kurosawa is a big influence on a lot of American directors. I mean, I just finished watching Fistful of Dollars today for my review. Well, I'm doing time travel right now. It's Saturday for the people watching. It's Wednesday night for me and Jen, and I watched Fistful of Dollars today, and it's basically Yojimbo. I mean, there are major differences, but it's Yojimbo.
Yes, that. Yes, and you do actually see quite a bit of. You see
Well, okay, so I was actually going somewhere with this, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so Kurosawa also inspired Lucas. He says Seven Samurai is his favorite Kurosawa film. But I've heard from other movie reviewers. Hold on, let me plug my laptop in. Other movie reviewers that A New Hope is partially inspired by Hidden Fortress, another Kurosawa Toshiro Mifune movie, which I really want to see. I want to see that movie. It's in my Amazon wish list. But the attack on the Death Star in that movie were like shot-for-shot remakes from another like World War II movie, if I'm not mistaken. And that's what I'm getting at. Is like you do what you're inspired by, and it's somehow, I don't know. I can't really put it into words. Am I making sense?
You are. The one thing I would say that I wish I had kept up closer in the sort of the film analysis world, because like I had to take some film history courses and stuff for my degree, but I sort of didn't. I haven't kept up, right, with the people that are really critically thinking about and then writing about film. But I think, especially given the examples you just gave, right, there's a conversation to be had in film, especially in film history, where we start to be more careful and discreet with our language between like being inspired by and sort of
what, copying?
Just like repainting. copying with different colors, right? Because, like, being inspired by, so, like, saying, Star Wars was inspired by Seven Samurai, or maybe not Seven Samurai directly, but, like, inspired by his work. Yeah, okay, you can see it, and, like, maybe you'll see, like, little moments that you're like, oh, that's very much like this. But then there's, like you said, Fistful of Dollars is almost beat for beat, plot point for plot point, moment for moment, a copy. Like, that's where
surprisingly enough,
to be had there. Certainly that's a conversation that's had a lot in music, right? Like, when is it an homage?
Right.
When is it just an inspired by? And when is it a remix? And when is it just straight up, you just copied it? And because, like, those are all different things, and they carry. And there's, Fistful of Dollars is a great Western. I'm not gonna, like, crap on it, but I think there's some conversations to be had there, some interesting analysis to be done, and then from that, maybe even growing and branching out into a conversation about, okay, so if you have two films that are essentially the same story being told, like not in that general genre sense, but like in a very practical sense, why is one more well known in a certain area or in a certain group versus another, and what does that have to tell us about, like, access and awareness and all that stuff? It opens up some interesting conversations.
It does, but in the sense of Fistful of Dollars, because that seems to be the one we're using as an example, how many people back in the 60s, besides movie buffs, knew who Akira Kurosawa was? I would assume that to the average moviegoer back in the 60s when Fistful of Dollars came out, Fistful of Dollars was like, this is a brand new story.
Well, and I'm not denying that, right? That's why I'm saying, like, there's some interesting conversations to be had.
Yeah.
And what I find fascinating, for me anyway, to take it back to, like, archiving and preservation, none of those conversations can be had if those films don't persist and people can't watch them outside of their original context, right?
Right.
And so the idea of, like, because you can't keep everything, right? There is neither time nor money to do that from a very practical standpoint. So, like, how choices are made of what gets kept and what gets preserved, and then what gets made accessible and findable, has an impact on how we view the history of film. It has an impact on how we can look at and analyze film. It has an impact on the conversations that people have about this medium. So, yeah. Which, thankfully, in the archival community anyway, it's something that the community is aware of, right? The professionals in the field talk about this and discuss it, and, not everyone agrees, and so, like, there's a lot of like, examining and thinking going on. People don't just make sort of flippant decisions, which, I don't know, I think it's a good thing that people are aware of it within the field and try to be conscious of it when they're doing their work.
I want to touch on foreign films, because you said you watched a bunch of those in your pre to teenage years.
Yes.
So when it came to non-English ones, what was your reaction to subtitles?
I didn't mind them. I still don't mind them. Sometimes I even prefer them, just because, I don't know. I don't mind reading them that quickly, and I've rarely found a film where there's subtitles that move too fast for me to, like, know what's happening. Um, I have found it interesting because Paul prefers dubs. Generally speaking, there's a couple exceptions to that, but in general, he prefers a dub. So we'll have something playing, and it'll be playing dubbed with the subtitles, and I find it fascinating how they can differ. Which, gets into the whole art of translation.
Right. So I started out being like Paul when it came to subtitles. I'd rather it be dubbed than have to read, because you might miss something, or you might miss something visually, or you might miss dialogue or whatever. And I've grown, especially with the samurai films that I've watched. I've grown an appreciation for subtitles, because, and you just hinted on it, there's a big difference between subtitles and hearing it in its natural language and a dubbed version, because there's also a disconnect there. It's not nearly as authentic or as good, if at least to me, when you hear it dubbed in any other language than it was first presented in. And I first realized about translation issues watching certain anime, specifically Bleach. All right. Well, let me first say I don't condone pirating. I used to, but I don't condone it anymore. I don't do it anymore. But I pirated Bleach, and there were many different translations that I saw. I was like, wow. It really does matter.
Well, translation is definitely an art. I think for me, the thing I struggle with dubs, and definitely this is something I feel more strongly when I'm watching live action with a dub versus animation with a dub. When you're seeing the image, you're seeing these people go through and experience certain emotions, certain interactions, right? The person who's doing the dub is trying to not only... It's not like a robot voice, right? Like, they're trying to act. They're trying to match that emotional expression you're seeing on screen. That's incredibly hard to do. Right? And so I feel that disconnect a lot stronger, because like sometimes it doesn't feel like maybe the tone is matching what I'm seeing and things like that. When I am reading subtitles and hearing the original language being spoken, even when I have like no concept of that language, right? Like when it's so different and I really don't have any understanding of the words, I'm still able to hear the emotion and the inflection and all of that, So for me, I feel a deeper connection to the story when I can hear the actor, even if I don't understand what they're saying. I can read the words to understand, what they're saying. That's fine. I need to hear that emotion, that inflection. It's not as bad. That visceral response, I find, isn't as bad with animation. I think because, one, the voice actors hired for animated dubs tend to be voice actors who do animation anyway. And then, I don't know, maybe something about animation, I have a higher tolerance for disconnect because, you're buying in to animated film in a different way because it isn't physical people and places and things. I don't know.
And I would say, my opinion, that English dub is probably among the worst. I think when you see something that's first done in English but then dubbed in another language, I think that works a little better. Because I don't know. I don't know. I haven't watched a whole lot of English things being dubbed in other languages to actually to talk about that, but I've seen enough English dubbed things. I just didn't get the feel that they put as much effort into it as they wanted to or as they should have. Um, I I don't know. They sound phoned in to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about how they hire the voice actors for dubbing to like have an opinion on that. I think, you know, I think at its core, like I said, like the job of trying to be a voice actor who's trying to match this thing that's already been made is incredibly challenging. So I'm hard pressed to like come down too harshly on them. I'm sure like in some situations people really have just sort of like slapdashed it together and not cared. But I don't know. I don't know how often it happens. I'm hoping this. My hope is like as more and more English speaking people, especially Americans, are showing interest in non English speaking film and television, that, you know, people who are responsible for dubbing and making those choices do find ways to up the quality and maybe change that disconnect that I feel. Because, you know, say what you will about Netflix and things like that, the fact, like the level of exposure I have now to non-English speaking film and television, and especially non-English speaking film and television that's not French or Italian, which were like the things you could normally find most easily, has been awesome. Like I've gotten to see some really cool stuff that's, you know, different ways of telling stories, or, you know, visually telling stories, and just different stories. And yeah, it's been great. So I don't know. We'll see we'll see how things evolve. As technology evolves, maybe it'll be easier to like line up the language with the facial expressions, and then, you know, it'll all feel more real.
Or maybe they'll just. Okay, so do you know how movie theaters issue headphones for the hearing impaired?
Mm-hmm.
Or even for the blind for like descriptive purposes?
Yep.
Well, so we're pretty close to universal translators. And I'm thinking that those headsets will also soon be issued out for non-English, well, for different language films. Not necessarily non-English, but globally speaking, it'll be in your ear translating for you instead of you having to either read or see potentially bad dubbing. I don't know. That's something that popped into my head during this conversation.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting because certainly one of the things you run into, especially when you move outside of the Romance languages, just because English sentence structures tend to more closely follow the sentence structures in Romance languages. The trying to think of how to phrase this. The way something is said, like, it goes beyond just like how the number of words. Like, you've seen like the situations where the person's mouth stops moving and the words keep,
Right.
You still hear someone talking.
Right.
And it's because in the original language, the idea being expressed both in terms of the number of words and then also just like audibly the way those words are constructed and then sounded is shorter than the number of words and the length of those words in English, right?
Right.
So there's that piece of it.
That's where like kung fu parodies came from.
Right, and I mean some of those were done on purpose. I would think people are like, But it also happens in like very serious, like people taking it very seriously dubbing.
Right.
Just by the nature of language and lingual differences. But then it can go beyond that too. So like even if you have words of similar lengths, like this actual structure of the sentences can be pretty fundamentally different. I'm trying to remember. Oh, I think it was Russian. But what is the part of the sentence that Russians don't use? I'm gonna screw this up. I think it's like the verb to be or something like that. I might be getting the verb wrong, but there's a verb in English. I am like 90% sure it's to be, but so like in English we say I am going to the car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. If you do a direct translation of Russian saying a similar thing, it would sound like I go to car. So it's not the to be part, it's the. What is that? Is that a participle? Oh, I don't even remember. But whatever. That part of the sentence. They don't have it in their language. It's like not needed. And so, by nature of that, the sentence sounds shorter in their language than in English because we have literally added extra words. So I don't know. Interesting.
That made me think a lot.
I'm fascinated to see where technology takes us in terms of our ability to enjoy each other's media and like discuss it.
So that made me think of a fun fact about Star Trek and languages. So have you seen all the Star Trek movies?
No.
Have you seen Search for Spock?
No, I think I saw a scene from it.
Okay.
Is that the one with the whales?
No, that's the fourth one, Voyage Home. Okay, Search for Spock is where there's some Klingon language in the first one, Star Trek the Motion Picture, but there's way more of it in Search for Spock. And they actually wrote out lines in English for everyone. If it was written in Klingon, it would just say in the script in Klingon or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could remember the person they contracted to actually make the language, but what they did was form the language to use the lip motions that the English words were. They came up with sounds that mimicked they came up with sounds that use the same motions as the regular words.
Okay.
So that's really cool.
That's nice, because then they avoided having that disconnect.
Right. So they just did a bunch of ADR. But yeah, now it's a real language, apparently.
Well, oh yeah. I mean, like, there are people that learn Klingon.
It's a college course. It became like a college course like 20, 30 years ago, didn't it?
I don't know. I certainly never saw it on any of my language offerings.
Well, I think it's like in a college out in California or something like that. It's not like nationwide or anything like that.
I believe it. I believe that there are some colleges and universities that allow you to learn Klingon as your language.
Oh, nowadays you probably have Elven and Dothraki.
I don't know. I don't know if those languages have been fleshed out enough to qualify. It's not. I don't know. It's not something I've ever looked into.
Yeah, it just made me think of that because we were talking about dubbing and stuff, and like this is dubbing, but it's on a whole nother level.
Well, it's language creation, right? Which is a whole nother.
But they still have to dub it in there.
Well, the Star Trek chose to do it that way, but like Dothraki, they wrote that out in the scripts, and the actors learned it and spoke it.
Right, which is also really cool.
Yeah, so like I do like that people have taken different approaches to it. That's interesting. But
do you have a favorite genre?
favorite genre? Probably a tie. I would say it's a tie between horror and musicals.
So,
And like with horror, I like horror that's not gory without a reason, right? Like I don't mind explicit violence or blood or anything like that, but like it has to be purposeful to the story. Like it cannot be the story in and of itself, if that makes sense.
so you're not a fan of Saw?
See, I don't mind Saw because there is a story there.
Oh.
Some of them get a little bit much, and I'm like, oh, I think maybe that was more than it needed to be. But I actually, Paul and I one weekend sat and watched like I think 4 of the Saw movies in a row.
I think I've seen the first 3, and I can admire the first one for its simplicity, like the simplicity of the story, the simplicity of the actual making of. That's awesome how they made that first one. Which reminds me, simplicity, or just working on it like a little small to no budget. I'd really do you know the name of Rodriguez's first film? I really want to see that.
Oh, wasn't it? Was it the one with Salma Hayek and Antonio Banderas? Hold on.
I'm not sure. I just know in my YouTube viewings of filmmaking, one of them was like the no budget, the low to no budget filmmaking, and Rodriguez's first film was one of the ones they talked about. And
I love his work,
including the kid stuff.
Seriously, his.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, but he made movies just for his kids.
Well, but one of the things I really like about him is you can watch his like movies that are made for adults.
Right.
They should not be shown to children.
No.
And you can watch his films for children, and you see the same sensibilities. You see the same like care about like how he frames a shot or how he takes you through an action sequence. Like, I really love that about him. I love that he makes movies that are telling stories he wants to tell and doesn't get bogged down by this idea of like, oh, it's for kids, oh, it's for grown-ups or whatever. Like, he just sort of he tells the story he wants to in the visual way he wants to. I love that about him. El Mariachi, I think is what you're thinking of?
Maybe. I can't remember.
I think that was one of his first movies, and which I have seen, and I loved it. That was Antonio Banderas, and he plays I guess he's an assassin? I don't know. But he has this awesome guitar case that hides his gun. And there's some great visuals associated with that. Hold on. Let me look this up.
Maybe it is El Mariachi, because they take one of the scenes to show like how he can work with like next to no budget, because he only has so much film and he has to get this one shot, and this one shot is the character with his guitar case. Is why I think you're correct in the movie. He's trying to get up something, and he keeps on trying to toss the guitar up there and climb up, and they keep on not getting the action they want. So what they end up doing is they have the scene where he throws up the guitar, cut, and then they show him like climbing and stuff like that. He wanted to get all one motion, but he had to cut it up, and it's fascinating what your brain will do when you have to. How you will think outside the box when you have no choice to.
No, he's terrific. I think the first movie of his I saw was From Dusk Till Dawn.
That is a great movie. I love that movie.
And then I went back and saw El Mariachi, because that one I had to like search out at a library to rent or borrow. You don't rent from a library, you borrow. But you know what I mean.
I want to say that most of Sin City was just Rodriguez, a camera, and like a studio with actors.
I would want to verify that. That doesn't sound real.
That's why I say I want to say.
What it takes to make a movie. But
right. Especially a movie on that scale.
Yeah. Well, but even almost any movie, really, because like, if you're shooting 35 millimeter film, 35 millimeter film doesn't have any sound capture on it. It's strict image. You have to have a sound guy at minimum. You probably are going to want at least one or two people doing lighting, helping you with lighting. Just
I can't remember. I don't know. Something about Sin City where he did a lot of the work himself. Something like that.
I believe that. My understanding is he's an incredibly hands-on director. But yeah. No, I love his work.
I wonder if he felt weird when he filmed that one episode of Mandalorian where he actually had a budget. I'm kidding, by the way. It's like, money?
Oh, he's worked with money by now.
I know. I'm just kidding. He's just notorious for working, like, for able to pull off amazing movies with low budgets.
Oh, yeah.
I think Hollywood could take a page or two from his notebook. Same with other great directors.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what they're trying to do and how they want to do it. You know, Scorsese wanted to film Gangs of New York for decades.
Yeah.
You know, his original conception of it had, I think, Robert De Niro in the role that Leonardo DiCaprio ultimately played.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a dream in the making.
Yeah, well, you know, it took a long time. You think he had to find financing he had huge scenes that were filled with extras that were not CGI. They were physical people standing there doing stuff. You know, that costs a lot of money. That's not cheap. So, you know, finding financing for that had to have been a bear. But yeah. Well, I don't want to cut it short, but I also need to make dinner.
No. I'm kind of sensing that we're running out of topics, or I'm running out of topics, I should say. I probably should have been a little more prepared for this.
It's all right. You got a good hour, which, you know, you can edit that down.
Yeah. I'm going to edit this part out.
I don't know. Maybe people would enjoy hearing the non-film banter.
Yeah, I've done that a couple of times. So my friend Sam and we did our top 5 favorite video games, and
nice.
He went over to his phone like when I hit record, and I said, "You're going to turn off your phone." And what I ended up doing, I didn't use a visual for that. I only used the audio, and my normal intro for these, I just kept on going until I actually started it. I might leave that in. Like, well, you'll find out on Saturday, because I'm going to find out editing it. All right, I won't keep you any longer. Thanks for coming on, Jen. It was very educational having this conversation with you. I learned far more than I anticipated. And I'm grateful for learning. I'm grateful, too, because who knows where it would take me.
There you go. Well, thanks for letting me geek out about film and the mechanics of film, because I haven't gotten to do that in darn near a decade, so that was fun for me. Hopefully I didn't screw up my facts too badly with my not-so-great memory. No, but thanks for having me on, Steve. I appreciate it.
Well, Jen does not want to be found on social media, but she is on previous episodes. There's the one of Dungeons and Dragons, and then there's the Green Dragon story. So if you want to see more of Jen, or hear more of Jen in this case, you can check those out.
Awesome.
I want to thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you saw, please like this. Please also share it. Let everyone else know about us. But most, wow, why am I having trouble with this? If you really liked it, hit the subscribe button. Thank you again, and live your imagination.